Welcome to Impactful Chats, Episode 5. I'm Malin Martinez.
And I'm Seth Truger.
And today we're chatting with Eric Reinhart, a PhD and MD candidate, PhD candidate at Harvard in anthropology, and MD candidate here at the University of Chicago. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And so the reason we're having you here is because you published a paper in journal Health Affairs just last week, in which you analyzed how jail cycling was contributing to the spread of the novel coronavirus in Chicago and Illinois. Tell us about what motivated this study and about your main findings.
Sure. Well, as the coronavirus was gaining steam in the US in late March, I had done ethnographic work previously in Cook County Jail. And I thought it was quite obvious that the arrest procedures and the subsequent booking and releases of inmates from their pretrial detainees from Cook County Jail would be disseminating the novel coronavirus to Chicago neighborhoods. But this kind of analysis I wasn't seeing in any scientific publications or in media publications, which at that time, and really until very recently, were focusing on prison epidemics and jail epidemics. So this is very important, of course, but they were focused on the risk to incarcerated populations. They were omitting the additional risk, which at a population level is much more significant, which is that the additional risk that inheres in the fact that jails are extremely porous. They are very much part of our communities. Most people who are arrested and detained at the jail are detained, or jails around the country, are detained for a matter of days, some only a matter of hours. Of course, there are exceptional cases where people stay an extremely long time, and this is also a problem. But because of this constant cycling, where you arrest somebody, they're waiting a trial, maybe they're able to submit cash bail and they get out, maybe for other reasons they are released, they have not been convicted of a crime. Because of that intense degree of cycling, over 100,000 people cycle through Cook County Jail every year. More than 5 million people cycled through American jails every year. This seemed like a really important issue. So I thought, rather than just complaining about the fact that nobody was doing this or reporting on this, I thought I should just do it. It's a very simple study. I didn't need money to do it. I could do it myself.
Okay.
So what are the larger implications of the study? What do you want people to take away from it?
Or can we hear the sort of black and white findings? No, it's okay. I'm curious what the actual findings were, and then I'm very curious about the larger implications. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I've been talking so much about this that I forget to say the basic things first.
Yeah.
So the study, we got data through a Freedom of Information Request Act, Freedom of Information Request Act, I'm getting this backwards, Freedom of Information Act request to the Sheriff's Office with zip code level data on all of their detainees from February 1st until April 19th. The day they gave us the data.
For Cook County Jail.
Cook County Jail, yeah, from the Cook County Sheriff's Office. We also had data from the Illinois Department of Public Health, public data on zip code level cases in Illinois of SARS-CoV-2, cases of COVID-19 rather. The day that we got the data, we finished the study, but it took a long time to place and get through peer review. What the study shows is that jail cycling independently of the other control variables that I'll talk about that we used, independently is linked to 16%, 1 in 6 of the cases statewide in Illinois and in Chicago, both at the city level and the statewide level. We do this with bivariate and multivariate regressions, controlling for race, poverty, population density, public transit use. You'll see in the appendix also age distribution, gender distribution, not in the study, but we did educational attainment. We find that when we account for all these other significant variables, not all of them are always statistically significant in different analyses, but several of them are. When we isolate just jail cycling, it accounts for 1 in 6 cases. In combination with race and poverty, in Chicago, these 3 factors cumulatively are associated with 60% of cases, statewide with 52% of cases. Some misrepresentations of the study have stated that we found no positive correlation between race and poverty in SARS-CoV-2. That's not correct. That's explicitly refuted in the study. So that's kind of the basic finding. Jail, and this is the most significant driver of all the factors that we looked at. There may be other confounders we didn't have data for or didn't think of, but of all the factors we looked at, this was the most significant predictor of COVID cases in Illinois.
That is so interesting. And then, so yeah, Seth, you were.
Yeah. So what do you think the larger implications are? What do you think the main takeaways are for everybody?
Well, the scale of this problem is huge. So the study it's a case study. We have data from only one jail. There are many jails in Illinois. Similar dynamics are happening in other jails. There are hundreds of jails around the country with active COVID-19 outbreaks. It would be a mistake to understand this study as about Cook County Jail or the Cook County Sheriff, Tom Dart, who's actually a very progressive sheriff, or their efforts to control COVID-19 in the jail, which have been commendable. What this study really indicts is our system of incredibly aggressive, unnecessary arrests at a massive scale, and the subsequent jailing of these individuals for which there's no public safety reason for them to be incarcerated. Now, not only is that fact of unnecessary arrests harming incarcerated in a very direct bodily material way, it's harming the whole of the American public. I mean, we can't scientifically prove this because we only had data for one jail in one major US city. We are expanding this research, looking at actually expanding it nationally, but our preliminary research so far on that national expansion suggests this is happening in other major American cities as well. So and this isn't if, we can't say, if our findings are replicable in other major US cities, this accounts for an enormous number. Excessive arrests and jailing accounts for, may very well account for, tens, hundreds of thousands of COVID cases and thousands of deaths. Most of these deaths are in Black and brown communities in the US. An important data point from our study, we will include in the print version, was that 60% of the additional cases that are linked to jail cycling are in Black majority zip codes. 75% of the people processed through Cook County Jail every year are Black. We have every reason to believe that if 60% are in Black majority zip codes, 60% of these additional COVID cases and deaths, then actually a significantly higher proportion is in Black households or is manifesting in Black households. So this is not just like a general public health issue itself, which is obviously clearly important. It's also a very pressing issue of racial justice and racial inequality in the US, which is being fueled by our policing and mass incarceration system. So my takeaway, if I am allowed to just give like one takeaway, which Health Affairs, which is a strict scientific publication, wouldn't let me say these kinds of things to their credit because they want to make sure it's all 100% scientifically justifiable. But the takeaway that I think is clear from the study is that we need to immediately stop arresting non-violent offenders, the vast majority of whom, and this constitutes the majority of arrests in the US and jailings in the US, and many of the people who go to prison. The vast majority of these people, there is no public safety reason to incarcerate them or arrest them. George Floyd is alleged to have passed a counterfeit $20 bill in Minnesota. That does not present a public safety problem for anyone. You can give him a citation, you can give him a summons. There's no reason for somebody like that to be arrested and taken to jail, which he would have been had he not been murdered first, as we all know. So that's, I mean, I don't want to recruit his case as like alibi for my research and use it in that kind of way. But my point is that that is linked to precisely the kind of implications that should be read out of our health affairs study. Also, I should clarify, I've been speaking all this as if it's solely my research. I recruited a friend of mine who's an economist who has very sophisticated quantitative methods to help me with this. So there's a co-author, Daniel Chen. Yeah.
Right. If I could just summarize for a second, I think one of the takeaways from here, basically in the setting of the panic, we're putting people with basically suspicion of, not convicted of, but suspicion of, basically low-level crimes at higher individual risk for them getting, as well as kind of worsening public health, exposure.
That's exactly right. And if I can say one more thing, because it's being misunderstood in some outlets, this is really not a matter of infection control within the population that's housed in the jail. Because even if you bring the infection numbers into jail down to active infections down to zero, this is still a massive problem. And the reason is because when you arrest people, hundreds of people every day, you put them in transit vehicles, for example, the mass protester arrests. You then put them in these confined rooms in the jails across the country, where people are standing in very tightly packed lines in most cases. Even if somebody brings an infection in from outside, they got infected in their own community. They may or may not know this. By the time you're done processing those people into the jail, even if you immediately release them, many of those people in those rooms, this is true also in the release process, will be infected. That will not be caught by tests that are administered now at Cook County Jail upon intake. Because as we all know, or as you know, there's a necessary incubation period. You're not going to test positive if you've just been exposed. So this is a really a system-wide problem that can only be addressed not just at the jail level, but by changing arrest practices.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that I can try to answer for you. I'm sorry, I'm long-winded.
No, that's okay. There's I think some important nuance in here. That's worth getting out.
Yeah, and sorry guys, everything paused on my end for a second, but I have everyone back. And so it sounds like so this week then the Wall Street Journal quoted your article and was kind of saying that the takeaway is that criminals being released from jail are spreading coronavirus to the community, and your paper proves that, and that's a problem. But from what you're saying, it actually sounds like it's almost the opposite takeaway is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's directly the opposite. They misread the study, I suspect willfully, and factually misrepresented it at various points in the article. But the biggest problem is they refer to these people as criminals.
Right.
They're not criminals. These are pre-trial detainees, 42% of whom will be proven innocent, 94% of whom have not been even arrested for alleged violent offenses. They do not pose a public health risk or a public safety risk in most instances. Yeah, they unfortunately recruited my article incorrectly to attack Sheriff Dart and Judge Evans, two progressive figures in Cook County who have tried to implement serious jail reforms. I mean, there's a long way to go, but their efforts and their intents have been commendable. Unfortunately, my research has been abused and distorted to try to attack progressive jail reform, whereas what I'm saying is that we need to accelerate that and expand that dramatically and also include real policing reforms so we're not arresting these people to begin with.
Right.
So what other responses have you seen to your article so far?
Sheriff Dart was pretty effective initially, actually. He was very opposed to the study. He's under a lawsuit right now for allegedly not controlling the infection well in the jail. So he has liability concerns. The county has liability concerns. Unfortunately, they made the study in their opposition. They made it about them, as if this was an indictment of them, which it really is not. And I tried to plead with them, like, work with me. This is actually something that's beyond your control. And that we could together make a case that actually this is not an issue of Cook County Jail. This is a system-wide issue. And we have shared interests here, which is implementing real change beyond the level at which you're capable of making changes in the jail. Of course, he has some power, but not nearly enough to make the changes we need. So unfortunately, I've been trying to turn the reporting of it, the framing of it, back towards the broader problems and not these kinds of very specific and, in some kind of sense, comparatively petty problems.
Right. And so you kind of just a little bit touched on this, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you thought about how the recent protests are interplaying with what you're talking about.
As I'm sure you have both seen, there's some reporting, some even public health people who are saying the protests are very dangerous. They're going to spur a second wave. People shouldn't be out protesting. I think what my study shows is that the real public health threat in America, perhaps one of the biggest, maybe the biggest public health threat in America, is our system of hyper-aggressive policing and mass incarceration. That's the object of the protesters' criticism right now. And the fact is, epidemiological studies have shown that outdoors, especially when people are wearing masks, they're not perfect, these masks, they're not all ideal masks, but actually the risk of transmission is quite low. You put these people in paddy wagons, effectively, make them wait for hours in a densely packed room to be processed through a jail, that's what the infection risk is. So I think it's very important that the protests continue for public health reasons, because they are pushing back against a major, maybe the major public health threat to our country in this moment. So I think it'd be very unfortunate if people tried to use this research to kind of disparage the protests. I think it very much indicates the importance of their continued efforts.
Right. So if there's a massive second wave from the protests, it's going to be from mass arrests happening during the protests and people being jailed.
That's my strong suspicion. Over 15,000 people nationally have been arrested, and not all of them jailed necessarily. Some are taken to precincts and holding facilities. There's also a risk there. My study can't measure that, but or our study rather, but that's also a risk. So yes, and many of them are cycled through jails. Cook County Jail has seen its census go up considerably of protester arrests. There are nearly 2,000 protesters. I don't know the exact number right now. It's hovering around 2,000 in Chicago alone. So that's a big. Okay, another thing I should have mentioned earlier. Sorry, I know you probably need to end. One way to interpret the study is there's a multiplier effect. For every person you put through the jail, you get over 2 additional cases in the community with a 3 to 4 week lag.
Wow.
This is at a population level. We can't trace which people were affected. At a population level, we see this on average. So for all of these people you're cycling through the jail, you're getting that many more cases. 2,000 protesters, 4,000 more cases in their communities. Those are very likely to multiply if the R naught is not below 1 in these communities, and many of them it's not. So this is a big finding, I think, for public health interest.
Okay. Well, thank you. This is just fantastic work, and this is really important stuff. And I think it really gets to the complex interplay between the George Floyd protests, the pandemic itself, how rooted all this is, in our society overall. So thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for on Impactful Chats. Keep up the good work. Take care.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.